Welcome to Midnight Whisper. Tonight, we bring you a chillin' tale that will keep you awake long into the night. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us bring more terrifying stories every week. Now, this is the story of a mysterious passenger, a figure who boards the midnight bus, only to vanish before the final stop. Some say he's a ghost. Others believe he's a curse tied to the road itself. So sit back, turn off the lights, and listen closely, because this ride may never reach its end. It was a cold, damp night in late October. The kind of night when the city felt deserted and every sound seemed louder than it should be. At the central bus station, the lamps buzzed and flickered, throwing pale yellow light across the cracked pavement. Daniel Hayes, a veteran bus driver in his late 50s, climbed into his bus with a weary sigh. He had driven the midnight route for nearly 2 decades. Nothing surprised him anymore, at least. That's what he thought. The route was simple, predictable. From downtown, through the outskirts, to the old industrial road, and back again. Most nights, the bus was nearly empty. Sometimes a couple of drunks, a night shift worker, maybe a student heading home late, but rarely more. That night, there were only 3 passengers at the start. A young woman with earphones, sitting near the middle. An old man clutching a grocery bag, and a teenager slouched near the window, eyes glued to his phone. The bus groaned to life. Daniel pulled out of the station and into the fog-laced streets. Neon signs from diners and bars glowed faintly through the mist. The hum of the engine was steady, almost comforting. Stop after stop passed, without incident. The city seemed asleep. Then, as the clock on the dashboard ticked past 12:17 a.m., the bus approached stop 14. Daniel frowned. Nobody ever got on at stop 14. It was a lonely, forgotten shelter at the edge of a closed-down factory district. The place was silent, abandoned, and half the time the light didn't even work. But tonight, someone was waiting. A tall man stood under the flickering lamp. His posture was stiff, his pale face barely visible beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. His clothes seemed old-fashioned, like something out of the 1950s. Daniel slowed the bus. His instincts told him to keep driving, but duty forced his hand. With a hiss of brakes, the doors creaked open. The man stepped aboard without a word. No coins, no ticket. He didn't even glance at Daniel. He simply walked down the aisle, his shoes making the faintest echo on the floor. He sat at the very back, hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes fixed on the floor. Daniel watched him through the rearview mirror. The man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't make a sound. The bus continued its route, but something had changed. The air felt colder. The passengers began to shift uncomfortably, sneaking glances toward the silent figure in the back. The teenager lowered his phone, suddenly uneasy. The old man clutched his grocery bag tighter. The young woman pressed her earphones deeper into her ears. Though her eyes darted nervously to the rear, Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. He told himself it was nothing. Just another passenger. Just another night. But deep down, he knew this ride would be different. The bus rolled deeper into the industrial district. Its headlights cutting through the fog, the streets grew emptier, lonelier, as if the city itself had fallen asleep. Daniel kept glancing into the mirror. The pale man in the back hadn't moved an inch. His hat cast a shadow over his face, but even from a distance, Daniel could see how unnaturally still he set like a statue. The air inside the bus felt heavier now. The windows fogged faster, and the hum of the engine seemed louder than before. The young woman removed one earphone, sensing something was wrong. She glanced toward the back and quickly turned away, her breathing shallow. The teenager whispered to her, "Did you see him?" She shook her head nervously, but her trembling hands betrayed her. At the next stop, no one boarded. The shelter stood empty, its light flickering weakly. Daniel almost sighed with relief until he heard it. A faint sound, a whisper. It came from the back of the bus. Daniel's eyes shot to the mirror, but the man hadn't moved. His lips were closed, yet the whisper lingered, soft and unintelligible, like a breath brushing against the ear. The old man with the grocery bag crossed himself silently, muttering a prayer. Another stop. No passengers. The bus felt colder now, so cold that Daniel rubbed his arms despite the heater humming at full blast. Then something else. The teenager's phone screen went black. He tapped it, swiped, pressed buttons, but nothing. The device was dead, though the battery had been full minutes ago. His eyes widened. He whispered, "It's him." The young woman stood suddenly, stumbling toward the driver. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling. "How much longer until the last stop?" Daniel forced a calm tone. "About 20 minutes. Sit down, miss. It's all right." But it wasn't, because when Daniel looked back into the mirror, the man was gone. The seat was empty. Daniel slammed the brakes. The bus screeched to a halt. The passengers gasped, some nearly falling from their seats. The old man shouted, "Where did he go?" The teenager bolted toward the back, checking under seats, peering into shadows. Nothing. The man had vanished completely. Daniel's hands shook on the wheel. He knew he had seen him. Everyone had. The seat still bore the faint impression of a body, as if someone had been sitting there. A silence heavier than death filled the bus. Then, as the passengers stood frozen, something happened that chilled them to the bone. The fogged window at the very back of the bus slowly cleared, and a handprint appeared, pressed against the glass. But from the outside, the bus stood frozen on the empty road, its engine rumbling low, headlights stabbing through the fog. Inside, silence reigned, broken only by the sound of shallow breathing. Every eye turned toward the back window, where the handprint smeared against the glass. It was pale, long-fingered, as though pressed by something that no longer belonged to this world. Daniel swallowed hard. His instinct screamed at him to drive, to finish the route and forget this night. But his hands refused to move. His body felt like it was nailed to the seat. The teenager whispered, "He's still here." Outside, the young woman shook her head, clutching the metal pole near the driver. No, he never left. He can't have. Daniel forced himself to speak. Everyone, sit down. Stay calm. He shifted the bus back into gear and slowly pulled forward. The passengers sat stiff and silent, their eyes darting toward the windows. The fog seemed thicker now, curling like smoke against the glass. More strange occurrences. A few minutes passed, then the bus lights began to flicker. Once, twice, then steady again. The old man muttered a prayer under his breath, his knuckles white around the grocery bag. The young woman finally whispered, "I heard of this. Years ago, my grandmother told me about a passenger who disappears." Her voice cracked. She said he died in an accident on this very route. Daniel's stomach tightened. He remembered something an old story among drivers, whispered like a campfire legend. A man killed on the industrial road in the 1950s. A passenger who boarded the midnight bus and never made it to the last stop. He had laughed at those stories before. Now, he wasn't laughing. The second appearance, the bus turned onto Hollow Creek Road, a stretch known for its abandoned factories. Shadows loomed tall. Broken windows stared like empty eyes. Suddenly, the young woman gasped. The pale man was back. He sat calmly in his seat again, as though he had never left. Same hat, same suit, same lifeless stare at the floor. "No?" the old man whispered. "I saw him vanish. We all did." The teenager backed away, stumbling toward the front. "Driver, stop the bus! Stop it!" But Daniel couldn't stop. His body was locked in a cold sweat, his hands gripping the wheel like iron. The pale man lifted his head. Slowly, his face came into the light. Skin to white, eyes to dark, lips curled into a faint, impossible smile. And then he spoke. "This bus never reaches the last stop. The descent into chaos. The lights died." For a moment, the bus plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the weak glow of the dashboard. Passengers screamed. The teenager banged on the door, trying to pry it open. The young woman clung to Daniel's seat, sobbing. The old man dropped his bag, cans spilling across the aisle, rolling in eerie silence. When the lights flickered back, the pale man was gone again. But his whisper lingered, snaking through every corner of the bus. Never. The final revelation. Daniel pushed the bus forward, desperate to finish. Every second stretched into eternity. The fog outside grew so thick it seemed like the world itself had disappeared. Finally, The last stop came into sight, or what should have been the last stop, but instead of the small terminal, Daniel saw something else. A building collapsed in ruin, twisted metal, burnt remains of a bus wreck. His eyes widened. He knew this place. This was the site of the old accident, the one from the 1950s. The teenager shouted. "What is this?" the young woman cried. "We're not supposed to be here." The bus rolled to a stop on its own, engine sputtering. The handprint appeared again, this time on every window, pale. Desperate hands pressing from the outside in. Daniel's heart pounded. He turned in his seat. The pale man stood in the aisle, closer than ever, hat in hand, face lit with an unnatural glow. He leaned forward and whispered directly into Daniel's ear, "I told this bus never makes it to the last stop." The passengers screamed. And then silence. Epilogue. At dawn, another driver found the bus parked in the depot empty. No driver. But on the back seat, a faint impression remained, as though someone had been sitting there all night. And on the window, even as the sun rose, the handprint never faded. Daniel tried to convince himself he was imagining things. The pale man had vanished and reappeared, yet the seat was empty again. The handprints on the windows faded slowly, but the chill in the air clung to every breath. The passengers whispered among themselves. The teenager refused to sit, standing near the driver. The young woman gripped the pole so tightly her knuckles turned white. The old man prayed, his voice cracking. The bus groaned forward. Each stop passed by, but no one boarded. The city felt dead, as though the world beyond the fog no longer existed. Streetlights flickered, then went out, leaving long stretches of complete darkness. At one intersection, Daniel slowed. A figure stood at the roadside, tall, pale, still. The passengers screamed. Daniel slammed the accelerator. The figure blurred in the fog and then, impossibly, appeared in the back seat again. The young woman finally spoke. Her voice shook as she told the others about her grandmother's warning. The legend of the vanishing passenger. She described how decades ago, buses would crash along this very route. Survivors swore they had seen the pale man board before disaster struck. The old man added his own tale. His father had once been a driver who quit after seeing the figure in the 1970s. He claimed the man was a spirit, cursed to ride forever because he never reached his destination. As they shared their stories, the atmosphere grew heavier. Daniel realized this wasn't just a passenger. It was something older, tied to the route itself. The bus was no longer a vehicle on city streets. Felt like it had slipped into another realm, a corridor between the living and the dead. Daniel glanced at the dashboard clock. 12:17 a.m. The same time he had seen when the man first boarded. But hours had passed. His heart dropped. Time wasn't moving. The teenager showed his dead phone. It still displayed 12:17. The old man's wristwatch had stopped at the same moment. Even the digital signs on the bus froze. The passengers realized, with horror, that they were trapped on a loop. The bus wasn't heading toward the last stop anymore. It was circling through the same stretch of road, again and again, guided by something unseen. The pale man now appeared in different places, sometimes in the back, sometimes in the reflection of the windows, sometimes standing in the aisle with that same cold smile. Finally, he whispered, "You are all passengers now, and this ride never ends." At dawn, the bus was found abandoned in the depot. The doors were shut, the lights off, the engine cold. But Daniel and his passengers were never seen again. Some say the route itself became cursed. Drivers avoid it. Those who dare to drive at midnight claim they sometimes glimpse a pale figure waiting at stop 14. And if you ever take the midnight bus, they whisper, don't look too closely at the other passengers, because one of them may not belong. And if you hear the words, "This bus never reaches the last stop," pray that you're not on the final ride. Asterisk, you've just heard the story of the vanishing passenger. But remember, some passengers never truly leave. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Midnight Whispers, so you'll never miss the darkness waiting for you every week. Until next time, keep your lights dim and your whispers close.